A Benton County grand jury today has issued indictments in 3 criminal cases involving sexual abuse and child endangerment.
Gary and Elizabeth Ciders accused of sexually abusing a child together, as 2 of their family members also face charges related to sexually abusing children. I'll take you inside the investigation, how these people are related, where the children are now, and what Ciders' family members are saying.
A Benton County grand jury issued indictments in 3 criminal cases involving sexual abuse and child abuse. Gary and Elizabeth Cider are accused of sexually abusing a child together, while 2 other family members face charges related to sexually abusing children. That is the official record. That is the indictment.
I have new details for you about this incredibly disturbing sexual abuse investigation into Gary Cider Jr. and his wife, Elizabeth Ciders, and the investigation that started it all. Gary Jr. and Elizabeth have been in jail since June 30th, and they're not going anywhere anytime soon, I can tell you that. Both are now charged with sex crimes against a minor who was more than 10 years younger than they were.
Think of a search warrant folded into a deputy's pocket, carried up to a front door on Omar Street, while 16 children waited on the other side. The warrant was for one man's DNA. What law enforcement found inside that house turned one investigation into an entire family tree under indictment.
From January to September 2022, that's when the alleged abuse took place. At that time, Elizabeth would have been 29 years old and Gary Jr. would have been 32, and Elizabeth was pregnant with twins during part of that time.
Gary Cider Jr. and Elizabeth Cider have been in jail since June 30th. Both are charged with sex crimes against a minor who was more than 10 years younger than they were. The alleged abuse ran from January to September of 2022. Elizabeth was 29. Gary Jr. was 32. During part of that time, Elizabeth was pregnant with twins who died the same day they were born.
His twins died the same day they were born. Gary Jr. and Elizabeth face 4 felony charges, 2 counts of sexual battery. Those are felonies in the 3rd degree, and 2 counts of unlawful sexual conduct with a minor, also 3rd-degree felonies. The alleged victim in this case is not one of Gary Jr. and Elizabeth's children, but they are related to the victim, and the victim was quite young.
The charges are specific: 2 counts of sexual battery, 2 counts of unlawful sexual conduct with a minor, all 3rd-degree felonies. The alleged victim is not one of their children, but is related to them. The victim was quite young when the abuse allegedly occurred, over 9 months in 2022. The paperwork already knew.
And he talks about the reason why law enforcement went to the home on Omar Street on June 30th with a search warrant.
These cases began as an investigation into family child sex abuse. Law enforcement sought the DNA of Gary Cider Jr. related to the child sex abuse case. Once Cider Jr. was located, search warrants were executed to secure his DNA for genetic testing. Upon serving the search warrants for the child sex abuse case, the existence and condition of the 16 children at the Omar.
The Benton County prosecutor explained how this began. Law enforcement sought Gary Cider Jr.'s DNA related to a child sex abuse case. Once Cider Jr. was located, search warrants were executed to secure his DNA for genetic testing. But upon serving those warrants, the existence and condition of the 16 children at the Omar Street house became known. The prosecutor said the child sex abuse cases involve intrafamily relations and do not pose a risk to the general public. He also said the case does not involve human trafficking.
Street house became known. The child sex abuse cases involve intrafamily relations and do not pose a risk to the general public, and I would also add, does not involve human trafficking. This case all started with diligent Dollar General clerks calling authorities with concerns over children they observed. We ask the public to be mindful of the circumstances around them, especially.
Before we go deeper into what the documents actually show, make sure you're subscribed to Trial&Crime, because we don't just cover the story, we follow the evidence. Now, the prosecutor made a point of saying this case started with diligent Dollar General clerks who called authorities with concerns over children they observed. Not a federal task force, not an undercover operation. Retail workers who noticed something wrong.
Said they went to the house on Omar Street on June 30th with a warrant for Gary Cider Jr.'s DNA. They wanted his DNA so they could conduct genetic testing. Why conduct genetic testing? Did the alleged victim in this case possibly have DNA evidence that she shared with investigators? Or was a child possibly born as a result of this abuse?
The timeline matters here. The investigation into Gary Jr. and Elizabeth started in March of 2026. The search warrant on Omar Street was not executed until June 30th. Nearly 4 months later, they had trouble tracking Gary Jr. and Elizabeth down. They were not easy to find. But when law enforcement did find them, they also found 16 children ranging in age from 1.5 to 18 in bad shape.
Kane.
A grand jury today has issued indictments in 3 criminal cases involving sexual abuse and child endangerment. These charges stem from criminal investigations conducted by the Benton County Sheriff's Office and the Ohio Bureau of Criminal Investigations, BCI. The cases are being prosecuted by the Benton County Prosecutor's Office with the assistance from the Highland County Prosecutor's Office and the Ohio Attorney General's Special Prosecutions Unit. In December of 2025, at the request of the Benton County Sheriff's Office, BCI's Special Victim
Benton County Sheriff Ryan Kane confirmed the sequence. In December of 2025, BCI Special Victims Unit opened an investigation into allegations of sexual abuse involving 2 children. That was investigation number 1. Information obtained in that investigation prompted BCI in March of 2026 to open a second investigation. This one involved allegations of unlawful sexual conduct with a minor.
Information obtained in this investigation prompted BCI in March of 26 to open a second investigation, this one involving allegations of unlawful sexual conduct with a minor. On June 30th, authorities executed a search warrant at a residence in Hamden, Ohio, and Benton County on Omar Street. There have been a lot of speculation and questions regarding the June 30th presence on Omar Street in Hamden. These indictments provide some insight into the ongoing investigation. However, to preserve the integrity of the ongoing investigation and to protect the victims, I conclude my statement here. I am thankful for the work of my deputies and our fellow partners at BCI.
So 2 separate investigations, 2 separate sets of alleged victims, but the same family, and on June 30th, authorities executed a search warrant at a residence in Hampton, Ohio in Benton County on Omar Street. The sheriff was careful. He said the indictments provide some insight into the ongoing investigation, but that he would conclude his statement to preserve the integrity of the investigation and to protect the victims.
So in December 2025, the Benton County Sheriff and BCI started investigating allegations of sexual abuse of 2 children. And remember, the prosecutor said alert Dollar General clerks called and reported concerns they had over children that they saw. Well, that first investigation involved 2 men. Those men are 23-year-old Josh Saunders and 40-year-old Brandon Henderson. You might be wondering, who are these 2 men and how are they connected to the Cider?
Now the picture widens. The first investigation involved 2 men, 23-year-old Josh Saunders and 40-year-old Brandon Henderson. Who are they? Josh Saunders is Gary Jr.'s nephew. He is the oldest son of Gary Jr.'s sister, Virginia, who goes by Jenny. Brandon Henderson is her longtime boyfriend and the father of some of her children. The family connections are not incidental. They are the structure of the case.
Brandon and Virginia have lived in Gallia County, Benton County, and Bloomer, Wisconsin. The Benton County prosecutor had said previously that the Ciders had lived for a time in Wisconsin. This may be the reason why. While Virginia Saunders has been with Brandon Henderson for many years, she is still legally married to Josh Saunders' father. Records show that Joshua Saunders and Virginia Saunders were married in April 2003 in Gallia County, but Joshua Saunders Jr. is actually serving time in an Ohio prison for murder. He's been behind bars since 2009. In 2016, Virginia Saunders described Brandon Henderson on Facebook as her soulmate and her other half. At some point, they moved back to Ohio from Wisconsin. And earlier this year, Brandon Henderson and Joshua Saunders Jr. were ordered by a court in Gallia County to take part in paternity testing for Virginia's children, so child support could be paid to care for some of the children. Those children are no longer in Virginia's custody. The grand jury.
Brandon and Virginia have lived in Gallia County, Benton County, and Bloomer, Wisconsin. The Benton County prosecutor had said previously that the Cider family had lived for a time in Wisconsin. That may be why. Virginia Saunders has been with Brandon Henderson for many years, but is still legally married to Joshua Saunders. Sir Joshua Saunders Jr. is serving time in an Ohio prison for murder. He has been behind bars since 2009. In 2016, Virginia Saunders described Brandon Henderson on Facebook as her soulmate and her other half. Earlier this year, Brandon Henderson and Joshua Saunders Jr. were ordered by a court in Gallia County to take part in paternity testing for Virginia's children so child support could be paid. Those children are no longer in Virginia's custody.
Indicted 23-year-old Josh Saunders on 4 counts, 3 counts of rape and 1 count of gross sexual imposition. The indictment claims that Josh Saunders raped a 9-year-old child between January 2020 and December 2020. There's a second rape charge that claims a child between the ages of 10 and 12 was sexually assaulted between December 2020 and December 2023, a 3-year period. And a third rape charge covers an allegation of sexual assault between June 2022 and June 2023.
The grand jury indicted 23-year-old Josh Saunders on 4 counts, 3 counts of rape, 1 count of gross sexual imposition. The indictment claims Josh Saunders raped a 9-year-old child between January 2020 and December 2020. A second rape charge claims a child between the ages of 10 and 12 was sexually assaulted between December 2020 and December 2023. A 3-year period. A third rape charge covers an allegation of sexual assault between June 2022 and June 2023.
3. The grand jury indicted Brandon Henderson on 21 counts. 1 count of endangering children, 2 counts of endangering children, 4 counts of gross sexual imposition, 4 counts of gross sexual imposition, 8 counts of sexual battery, 2 counts of endangering children, and those were misdemeanors. Brandon Henderson faces charges related to allegations of sex crimes involving a child over a period of many years.
The grand jury indicted Brandon Henderson on 21 counts. 1 count of endangering children, 4 counts of gross sexual imposition, 8 counts of sexual battery, 2 misdemeanor counts of endangering children. Brandon Henderson faces charges related to allegations of sex crimes involving a child over a period of many years. Read that again, many years.
Yeah, this case just gets more complicated and complex all the time.
Complicated, complex, and disturbing. More disturbing than we originally thought. I think you and I both suspected when BCI was involved in this, there might be a sex crimes aspect to this. But now we're learning that there are extended family members to the Ciders who have now been indicted on sex crimes charges, as are Brandon Henderson and Josh Saunders. So they were like investigation number 1 that started this whole thing. What is your reaction to that?
It makes more sense now. There were some people thinking that a misdemeanor public indecency case was what triggered this. We know now that's not true. BCI.
Special Prosecutor Mark Weaver put it plainly, this case gets more complicated and complex all the time, more disturbing than originally thought. BCI was involved because these are serious felony-level cases, and Weaver noted something crucial. Any adult who is a parent or guardian or someone acting as a parent or guardian has special responsibilities under Ohio law, and can be charged if there is any sexual activity or sexual conduct with one of those children. The paperwork already knew.
I wouldn't have been involved in something like that. BCI is brought in for serious felony level cases like these sex offenses. I do need an organizational chart to know how all these people are related and who's who. It's a little confusing in that respect. But any adult who is either a parent or guardian or someone acting as a parent or guardian does have special responsibilities and can be charged if there's any sexual activity or sexual conduct, 2 different things under Ohio law, with one of those children.
And it does appear now, in my reading of all of the documents and all of the records and the press releases and piecing this all together, that we have 3 victims here. We have 2 initial victims in investigation 1, and then 1 victim in investigation 2. And that is the victim involving Gary Cider Jr. and Elizabeth Ciders. And so they went to the house looking for Gary Cider Jr.'s DNA.
Weaver then mapped the victims, 3 victims in total, 2 initial victims in investigation 1, 1 victim in investigation 2. That victim is the one involving Gary Cider Jr. and Elizabeth Cider. Law enforcement went to the house looking for Gary Cider Jr.'s DNA for genetic testing. Why genetic testing? Weaver raised the same question. Was the alleged victim pregnant? That is possible. Or was there DNA evidence on clothing or bedding that needed to be matched? Either way, the warrant was not speculative. It was targeted.
And so why else would they go for genetic testing for Gary Jr.? I mean, they went there on June 30th with a warrant for genetic DNA for genetic testing. Is there any other reason that they would do that for genetic testing in your mind as a prosecutor, other than if the person who was sexually abused gave birth to a child.
Well, the other angle would be if the victim came forward with some sort of DNA evidence on her clothing or some other body part, and they wanted to test that against somebody else. That's less about genetic testing and more about a DNA match. But if some article of clothing had been maintained that suggested that a male had left his DNA or bodily fluids as part of an attack, then getting that DNA to match it could be a valid use for a search warrant.
So the genetic testing could be, I have physical evidence to prove this. I have an item of clothing or a piece of bedding with, possible DNA evidence on it, or it could be a potential pregnancy.
Yeah.
So why else would they go for genetic testing for Gary Jr.? Weaver offered two explanations. One, the victim came forward with DNA evidence on clothing or another body part and investigators needed to match it. Two, the alleged victim gave birth to a child and investigators needed to establish paternity. Either path leads to the same conclusion. Law enforcement had enough probable cause to convince a judge to authorize a search warrant for a man's body. That is not a fishing expedition. That is a specific allegation.
What's so disturbing about this is the fact that we have family members, and they're saying right now that the 16 Cider's children, that nobody is accused of sexually abusing them. Thank goodness, if there's a silver lining in this, that has not happened according to what we're being told right now. However, there are other children, extended family members of the Ciders, who prosecutors are saying were sexually abused at the hands of Gary and Elizabeth and what appears to be Gary's nephew, Joshua Saunders, and his brother-in-law, the longtime boyfriend of his sister, Virginia. So this is very disturbing. And we had heard there was this Wisconsin connection, Bloomer, Wisconsin. When they first arrested them, they said this family had been up in Bloomer, Wisconsin, or Wisconsin at one point in time. And now we're seeing that Virginia and Brandon at one point lived in Bloomer, Wisconsin. So that's where this connection came together, it looks like.
And then the family tree branches further. The 16 Cider children found at the house are not accused of being sexually abused. That is the one piece of relief in this case. But other children, extended family members of the Cider family, are the alleged victims. Prosecutors say they were sexually abused at the hands of Gary and Elizabeth Cider, Gary's nephew Joshua Saunders, and the longtime boyfriend of his sister Virginia, Brandon Henderson. And the Wisconsin connection now makes sense. Virginia and Brandon once lived in Bloomer, Wisconsin. That is where the family link crosses state lines.
Yeah, it's going to require a lot of investigation, a lot of explanation for these connections. You, of course, were a reporter in Wisconsin, so you're well suited to report on this case and knowing Ohio as well as you do. This is a crooked, rotten family tree, and figuring out which branch got involved with which other branch is going to be quite a difficult thing for first investigators and then prosecutors to do.
I don't want to get over my skis here, but is it surprising to you that the mother of the children is not somehow implicated? Is it possible that she was just in the dark about all of this?
That's possible. Certainly prosecutors want to bring as many charges as they possibly can. Under the rules of ethics, you have to have probable cause to believe that a charge is well-founded, and so prosecutors do have that bar to clear. But typically, we want to bring every charge we can bring to use as leverage so we can flip one defendant.
Weaver used a phrase that is hard to forget. A crooked, rotten family tree. Figuring out which branch got involved with which other branch will be difficult for investigators and prosecutors. But the deeper question is this. The mother of the children, Virginia Saunders, is not charged. Is it possible she was in the dark about all of this? Weaver was careful. Prosecutors want to bring every charge they can bring to use as leverage. So if the mother had complicity of any sort, she would have been charged. At least so far, she has not been.
Gary Cider Jr. and Elizabeth Ciders both face sexual battery charges related to a child. They're both charged with that, along with unlawful sexual misconduct or conduct with a minor. So does that, if you're a prosecutor, for Elizabeth to be charged with that, does that mean she was an active participant in this sexual misconduct, or was she simply aware of it?
You have to be more than aware to be guilty of those crimes. If they wanted to charge a complicity charge, they could do that. It's a different way of saying, well, you didn't do it, but you were involved in helping it happen. But to be guilty of the charge, you have to meet all the elements, and simply being aware of it, other than the child endangering piece, which being aware of something that's being done to a child and doing nothing about it, obviously can be child endangering. But for these sex crimes, you have to be guilty of each of the elements of this.
For Gary Cider Jr. and Elizabeth Cider, the charges are not about awareness. They are about participation. To be guilty of sexual battery or unlawful sexual conduct with a minor, you have to meet every element of the crime. Simply being aware of abuse is not enough for a sex crime charge. It can be enough for a child endangering charge. But for these felonies, the state must prove active participation. That is a higher bar. And both Gary Jr. and Elizabeth have been charged with it.
16 Cider's children who are now in therapeutic foster care. Those were all second-degree felonies when they were first charged. Now some of those are second-degree felonies, some are third, some are misdemeanor counts, both for Gary and Elizabeth, and then Grandma and Grandpa. What do you make of those charges being reduced in some respects? I mean, they're still charged with it, and they're innocent until proven guilty, but they're not all F2s anymore.
Yeah, the difference in these charges is the damage done to the victim. And so the more damage, the higher potential to get up to the F2, which is up to 8 years in prison. There's also a misdemeanor level child endangerment. I've seen those cases. I've worked on those cases. Careless parent allows a child to sort of run outside into the street, 3-year-old or something. That's typically a misdemeanor child endangerment. Nothing bad happened, but the parent was being careless. So remember,
Then there are the child endangering charges involving the 16 Cider children now in therapeutic foster care. Those were initially all second-degree felonies. Now some are second-degree, some are third-degree, and some are misdemeanors, for both Gary and Elizabeth and the grandparents. The difference in these charges is the damage done to the victim. Prosecutors have to prove the level of injury, either psychological or physical, to match the level of crime. That is why the charges were reduced in some respects.
of crime.
The Attorney General has said, we're not done yet. You know, this investigation is still underway. So do you see more charges coming, or do you think this is it and they're just still kind of dotting their I's and crossing their T's?
I know Attorney General Wilson. He's a career prosecutor. I don't think he would have said that if it were true. This does bring to mind another case that you covered that many of your viewers have watched out of Ohio, out of southern Ohio, which was the Pike County murder case, which continues to go on. And that was not immediately apparent as to who was who and who was responsible for several weeks to know all the different implications. And that once again was a large family who were doing horrible things to each other and to children. And so in that case, it took then Attorney General Mike DeWine, who's now the Ohio governor, a long time to help sort through exactly all the possible charges. We could be seeing that happen in this case as well.
The Attorney General has said, "We're not done yet." Weaver believes him. This brings to mind another Ohio case, the Pike County murder case, a large family doing horrible things to each other and to children. It took then Attorney General Mike DeWine a long time to sort through all the possible charges. That could happen here. The investigation is ongoing. More charges could come. The Attorney General does not say, "We're not done yet," unless he means it.
The wife for Joey Russell, the brother of Elizabeth Siders, posted on Facebook that if the allegations about Elizabeth are proven true, that they are basically done with Elizabeth, that you cannot harm children. And the attorney for Gary Cider Sr. issued a statement saying, "What we do know is that the original complaint filed against Mr. Cider Sr. charged him with 17 felonies of the second degree. The amended complaint filed 2 days later listed 16 felonies of the second degree, and the indictment just handed down by the grand jury in a process where the defense has no ability to participate or present evidence whatsoever, handed down only 10 felonies of the lesser third degree and 6 misdemeanor counts. It is certainly interesting that over a span of a month and a half, the number and severity of the charges against Mr. Cider Sr. has already continued to decrease significantly, with the state already admitting that further investigation continues to be necessary and ongoing, and the defense's investigation still yet to truly begin in earnest." And we're going to continue to follow this case and bring you the latest information as
The family is already fracturing. The wife of Joey Russell, the brother of Elizabeth Cider, posted on Facebook that if the allegations about Elizabeth are proven true, they are basically done with Elizabeth. You cannot harm children. And the attorney for Gary Cider Jr. issued a statement noting that the original complaint charged 17 second-degree felonies. The amended complaint listed 16. The grand jury indictment handed down only 10 third-degree felonies and 6 misdemeanor counts. The defense called that significant. The state says further investigation continues.
As soon as we get it. And that's it for this episode of Crime Fix.
Here is the unanswered question. The search warrant was for Gary Cider Jr.'s DNA. The prosecutor said genetic testing was the reason. The grand jury has now indicted multiple family members. But has anyone asked what the 16 children found inside that house saw before the deputies ever arrived? The paperwork already knew. Now the question is whether anyone else will be held accountable. If you want to dig into the public court filings yourself, start with the Benton County grand jury indictments. Read the charges. Read the names. Then ask yourself one question: who else knew? Like, share, subscribe, and turn on notifications for trial crime so you don't miss the next filing in this case.